Welcome, welcome. We're going to give folks another 2 minutes to join and then we'll get started. Excited to talk about Miami's future. Noel, good to see you. Thanks for joining us tonight. Susan, great to see you. Welcome, everyone. We're going to give it just 2 minutes and then we will get started. And if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, we'd love to know where you're zooming in from. Welcome, welcome. I'm going to give it about 30 more seconds and then we'll kick it off with this important discussion. All right. I hope we still will have some folks joining us in a few minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. My name is Raymer McGuire. I'm genCLEO's Director of Campaigns and Policy, and I'm so excited to be here tonight to talk about Miami's future and how we're going to handle waste. I know that this has been an issue that has been a little confusing for me, and there's one side fighting for zero waste, and there's another side saying that an incinerator causes less greenhouse gas emissions than landfilling. And I'm excited for us to get to the bottom. Before I pass it over to the commissioner and we start our discussion, I would love to give our new University of Miami organizer, Luna, just a few seconds to introduce herself, and our new FIU organizer, Crystal, a few seconds to introduce themselves. And Luna, do you want to kick it off?
Yes, hi, my name is Luna. I use she, her, they, them pronouns. I'm the new lead organizer at University of Miami, and it's great to meet everyone. So I'll pass it on to Crystal.
Hi everyone, my name is Krista Rodriguez. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently at FIU as a marketing major and also the new operations leader. Thank you so much.
So excited to have y'all both on the team. And without any further ado, Commissioner, would you mind introducing yourself and then we can jump into the tough questions?
Sure. I'm a formerly honorable commissioner. I was a City of Miami commissioner from 2015 until 2 years ago. I served 2 terms, ran for Congress, and now I'm a private citizen. But before that, I was a surfboard salesman and kite surfing teacher and always in the ocean, which led me to a fight with the city when there was a contaminated park in front of my house, not ironically due to incinerator ash from burning garbage in Little Bahamas of Coconut Grove, where Old Smoky used to be. So that led me down a rabbit hole of policy and civics, and I really didn't know much about that. But then I ran for office and became the commissioner and focused on cleaning up contaminated parks for the most part and environmental legislation. Since I've left office, I'm now working as a consultant, mostly in the environmental and governmental field, where I'm now helping Sierra Club in this effort against the potential country largest incinerator here in Miami-Dade County. So here we are. That's my intro.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. So I know we have some people on this call that have probably been following this issue for many years, but we also have others that might be new to the issue. Can you start by giving us the history of Old Smoky and kind of telling us how we got to where we are today?
So since caveman times, we've been burning garbage. It's a very accepted way of getting rid of our waste. And unfortunately, to this day, with all the technology we have, there is no way to mitigate the carbon emissions that are created or sequester the carbon emissions that are created. And as you know, at CLEO and genCLEO, the greenhouse gases are going to be the death of our planet. Global warming, climate change, storm surge, sea level rise, everything that we're facing means that every part of our government and society needs to do its part to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So we've been burning garbage here at an incinerator in Miami-Dade County until it burnt down 2 years ago. And as quote unquote unfortunate as that was, it was the perfect moment to reset the table and make new decisions fresh for what's best for the community without relying on a sunk cost of an existing contract, et cetera. And unfortunately, those who are in favor of incineration, being the incineration companies that get billion-dollar contracts on these, have really done a great job of educating policymakers here on how environmental their products are. And so it gets very confusing for the general public and even policymakers like myself at the time on what is the truly environmental decision, because it seems that the binary choice against incineration is landfilling. And everybody knows that traditional landfilling creates methane through anaerobic digestion. Once you encapsulate the organic matter in a landfill, the methane is created. And when that seeps out, it's actually worse than the CO2 potentially from an incinerator. And so these are the arguments and experts versus experts. But really what it comes down to is if we're trying to help the environment, which is the choice that's best for our community and planet? Which one can we control the most in terms of greenhouse gases? And from the research I have done through Sierra Club and Energy Justice Network, the results are very clear to me and those who study this side of the issue, that incineration CO2 cannot be sequestered, whereas landfills can see a whole new generation of technology that limits the methane and CO2 that comes from there. So that leads us to zero waste, as we're going to get to in the discussion. But where we are now is that the county was on a freight train approval process of a new incinerator, relying on incinerator money, insurance money from the burnt down incinerator, and potentially IRA money from the government. That's the Inflation Reduction Act under Biden, allowed for a lot of environment positive issues. Now, incineration is considered an environmentally positive issue, quote unquote, because it creates energy by burning the garbage. It creates steam that turns a turbine that makes energy. So they call it recycling, and they call it it's a renewable energy source. It's a horrible misnomer for those who have really studied it, because the negatives far outweigh the energy produced, and it's one of the worst ways to produce energy. I'm babbling. Please stop me, and I'll bring it back to where you want to take it, because it's a very complicated conversation that can go in many directions. But right now, the county has not yet made their decision, and we are getting closer and closer to hoping that they make the right one.
That's really helpful context. And so before we get to the vote that's in front of the commission, you mentioned zero waste. Can you explain what that is?
Yes, zero waste is a strong philosophy accepted globally around how to handle our garbage. It doesn't mean that you won't have any garbage. And it's a bit of an unfortunate name in that case, because it sounds like an unachievable goal. But you have to be aspirational towards zero waste. And what that means is diverting away from your landfills anything that can be reused or recycled or composted. That includes, obviously, food scraps and yard waste and anything that can break down. It includes plastics, aluminums, cardboard, paper, anything that can be recycled. And it includes demolition waste from construction, which takes up a huge portion of landfills. Because the idea is, how do we make our landfills last longer through capacity? And how do we make them cleaner so that they're not smelly, breaking down organic materials and creating methane? And that is the zero waste philosophy. Unfortunately, the name has been co-opted by nearly every municipality in the country and world to say we're on a zero waste track. Oh, but by the way, we also have to have this incinerator for everything we can't get with the zero waste. Technically, zero waste cannot include incineration. It goes against the philosophy of a zero waste program. So if a municipality has zero waste stickers all over their trucks and they're still taking those trucks to an incinerator, it's not the real thing.
And can we have zero waste and continue down the landfill path?
Yes. So landfills are going to be in existence no matter which path you take. The question is, how good and healthy are those landfills? Even with an incinerator, you have ash at the end. And where that was dumped in the park in front of my house, that is now carted, those types of leftover ash are now carted to the landfills. And they have toxic waste in them as well. So landfills will always be necessary. The question is, how good is your landfill? Do you have a zero waste philosophy landfill? Is what goes there organic compounds that break down? Is it all the other things that should be recycled? That's the contamination, as we call it. And so, yes, we can have zero waste landfills. And in fact, a good, healthy landfill is very distinctive from an old school, stinky methane producing landfill.
That's really helpful. And so I'm about to ask about composting and recycling, but before I do that, I just want to encourage our participants. Feel free to drop questions in the chat, and we'll address your questions. But you mentioned recycling and composting as part of this puzzle. The city of Miami, from my understanding, is currently evaluating a proposal to stop their recycling program. I've heard county commissioners speak about concerns that composting is somehow going to pollute our water systems and the aquifer. Can you describe what's the state of recycling and composting in Miami-Dade today? And where do you want it to be in 5 years?
There's a lot of myths around these technologies that are very easy to repeat, and they easily dismiss the benefits of these programs. A lot of these are perpetuated by the competitive nature of incineration. If you think about it, anything that you can compost is actually the fuel for an incinerator. And so they are diametrically opposed. You cannot be in favor of composting and in favor of garbage incineration at the same time. And in fact, when your municipality signs a contract with an incineration company, they sign a non-compete clause, which does not allow you to create composting because it's competitive to their needs and the contracts that feed their machine. So the first thing I'd love is for people to open their minds and take a fresh look at recycling and composting. One of the myths is that we just can't do it societally. Our community, our culture here in South Florida simply won't separate at the curb or in our kitchen or at a restaurant or on a cruise ship. And it's just not true. There's way too many places in the world that are too similar to us that are getting it done. Another myth is that composting is worse than landfilling because it's wet and stinky and you just picture the banana peels breaking down. And when run correctly with a good vendor, it is an absolutely enjoyable experience to visit a composting site. It's inspirational, in fact. It does not smell bad. And the end product, you get such a sense of gratification of seeing what goes in and what comes out. You can feel how rich and fertile it is. And it's also very financially viable for those in the composting industry. So it just hasn't been done here. And so to say we can't do it is a myth.
I know we're focused on Miami-Dade, but a few months ago, I attended a planning session in Fort Lauderdale, and the issue of composting came up. And the city representative said to me, "It can't be done." I said, "What do you mean it can't be done?" They said, "It cannot be done and make a profit." And I said, "Okay, well, that's a different thing, but we're not here to seek a profit. We're here to come up with solutions for our waste." You
That's a great
mentioned
point.
you mentioned carbon capture. Can you explain what that is and what role that plays in this process?
So yes, when you are burning anything, you are creating CO2. Obviously, that goes out into the atmosphere, and that is a greenhouse gas we're trying to avoid. And other than being able to avoid it, you try to sequester or capture it. If you can contain it in a way that doesn't release into the atmosphere, you have then neutralized the negative effects. And in the world of garbage incineration, They can scrub a lot of the toxins that are in the smoke. They can make it look really pretty and mask a lot of the smells. But if you go inside one of these beautiful incinerators with the ski slopes on the side, which they literally have, they're just straight up burning garbage. There is nothing that is capturing and able to sequester that carbon. The technologies are starting, and I've even visited some companies that are working on it, where they are creating a closed loop system where the smoke and the CO2 doesn't escape, but they're able to inject it underground into class 6 wells so that that carbon is never sees the light of day. But that technology is not here yet, and it's certainly not what's being considered by the current waste to energy facilities that are proposing to the county.
I had a county representative come to the CLEO office, and the pitch sounded great. We visited waste to energy facilities in Asia, in Europe, and there's new technology. It's cleaner. The harmful, toxic, cancerous pollution no longer exists. We are just a few years away from being able to capture the carbon. Do you think that that is an accurate reflection of the opportunity? Or how would you counter someone who says, we're not talking about an incinerator of 20 years ago, we're talking about new technology?
So, and by the way, all of you, I do encourage you to keep the chat open. Noel Cleland is in there as my color commentary backup man. He's my hype man. He's correcting anything I say wrong, and he's adding a lot of detail from Sierra Club. And we work together on a lot of these initiatives. So thanks, Noel. There are a ton of greenwashing stories around this industry, and it's very hard to know who's being really truthful about the environmental pluses and minuses. And there's all this fuzzy math that they can pull out. And this is, I used to, after I left public office, I worked for about a year at a sustainability consultancy. And one of the things we never got involved in was carbon accounting with regard to companies that want to offset their carbon footprint by, for example, saving a rainforest on the other side of the world. You know, American Airlines will never be carbon neutral, but they create math and pay money to companies that give them credits to make them feel like, and their shareholders feel like, they're no longer producing carbon. But the nature of their industry is producing carbon emissions. And so I really always question that sort of calculation and math to say, no, we're a carbon neutral facility, city, state, company, until you really dig down and see the math on how they're getting there. Are they really reducing emissions, or are they just finding a bunch of Band-Aids to put lipstick on the pig, to really mix metaphors? And so this is one, they do a great job of it. And I'll tell you how good a job they do. I was in office for 8 years and very proud that the city of Miami called itself zero waste because we burnt everything. We did not send to the landfill at all. And my solid waste director taught me that because we were making electricity, we were recycling. And this was amazing. This was our zero waste philosophy, was to burn everything. And so we had a very proud no landfill policy at the city of Miami, not the county, but the city of Miami. And it wasn't only until I got out of office that I realized how incredibly wrong and opposite that was. I actually did a tour at Covanta, which is the incinerator company, where they were showing slides of how they get to their net zero calculations and how they're actually better for the environment than landfills. And it's all just very complicated smoke and mirrors math. Because if you ask them the really hard questions, is there a technology today for you to sequester the carbon coming out of your stack, the flue? They cannot. They cannot argue that. You can even find fuzzy math in the EPA, which is unfortunate because it really makes it easier for them to make their arguments. But you can create a landfill that is mitigated from its carbon and methane emissions if planned correctly from start to finish. And that means from the resident at the curb to the vendors to the policymakers to your industries in town. And that involves just a very good holistic suite of legislation, incentives, mandates that get you to the point that you have an ecosystem leading to that healthy landfill.
That makes sense. So You're talking about landfills. My understanding is in front of the commission is the possibility of a new incinerator, obviously, the possibility of buying and building a landfill in Central Florida, or continuing to work with privately owned landfills in South Florida. Am I understanding those three options correctly? And you've addressed the incinerator option, but can you address kind of the idea of what it would look like for the county to buy and build a new landfill versus working with existing landfills? And is there a time crunch here? Like, are we going to run out of landfill space?
Very good question. So the three options you gave did not exist 2 months ago. And what I'd like to inspire you about, hopefully, is the power of healthy activism that is very well orchestrated amongst a coalition of groups and residents and advocates and policymakers to move these sorts of things. When I was first approached by Sierra Club to help on this initiative, I gave it about a 15% chance of stopping the incineration, because there was only one item on the agenda, and that was rebuild a new incinerator. And the only question they were posing was which city to put it in. And that was Doral or the Everglades or a few other choices that they had. And what we decided as a coalition was to try to push the NIMBY conversation away from fighting cities against each other and get everybody on board with a NOPE position, NOPE, which means not on planet Earth. And realizing that their voice as a coalition could move the county much better than letting the county divide and conquer them. Because you shouldn't wish this on any community. If you don't want it in yours, why would you want it in somebody else's? And, and unfortunately, the community with the least voice would be the Everglades, where it almost got placed. So that choice didn't exist until all of these groups got together and really started making noise. But in the background, we were also doing very calculated political advocacy. We were writing legislation and registering as lobbyists in various municipalities who would then support our effort, telling the county, hey, this is our garbage and our costs. We want you to find a different way to deal with this. And it started to work up to the point where Danielle Levine Cava received a letter from this coalition of 40 civic groups, many of which who are on here tonight, and environmental groups saying, look beyond incineration. And she did. To her credit, and this was very politically brave, she did a complete 180 from her position after listening to us in a meeting that she called. And I saw the light bulb go on. She said, wait, so what you care about is the carbon emissions. And that light bulb was what she needed to see, because it was very convoluted on methane versus carbon versus landfilling versus the trucking versus all these different confusing arguments. And once she saw that incineration is not supported by any environmental group, and every environmental group was asking her to look beyond that, and she did. She's taken a lot of hits since then because it looks like a flip-flopping wavering, but it's not. It's an evolution of a position through education, and it's a willingness to learn and advocate. Now we need 7 votes of the commission, the 13-member commission, to agree with her. And our unlikely ally in this situation is President Trump, whose golf course happens to be very close to the potential Doral incinerator site. So at the moment, his family's position about the Doral golf course is that they don't want it in Doral. But we're hoping they evolve their position not only to say, let's look beyond incineration as a whole, but let's empower the EPA to study these technologies and help fund the zero waste solutions in this community. And if it makes his golf course smell better, whatever. So that's the politics that's gotten us these 3 choices, and your 3 choices are correct. Will they choose an incinerator somewhere around South Florida or beyond? Will they expand landfills in Miami-Dade County, which we suggest they absolutely do not? Our landfills here are very old school landfills, and we need to start remediating them and removing the methane versus expanding them. You really can't just add on to them. And so the solution out of Miami-Dade County is, it bothers some because it involves trains or trucks taking our waste to another area. But the carbon footprint of that journey is far less than landfilling incorrectly or expanding the landfills we have here, or for the love of God, incinerating and burning the garbage here. It can be done efficiently through rail, and that's done in many, many urban communities around the country. It's not just to be NIMBY about it, it's to get to the right sort of geology and area where this particular landfill has a 100-year capacity lifespan, and it is potentially going to be managed with zero waste philosophies if we do our part on the front end of the diversion, the recycling, the composting, et cetera. So that is the option that we are advocating for at this moment.
And so to be clear, you're advocating for a landfill outside of Miami-Dade?
Yes,
And
yes.
and is there a proposed location, or that like we're not at that level of detail yet?
No, there is. It is managed by Waste Management, and it is a facility that I believe is already in place, and they're expanding it to the point of having this 100-year lifespan on it, and it's near Okeechobee in that area. So it is a rural area just for the space they need. But if they manage it correctly, and I've seen it done, these landfills actually can be quite pleasant, ironically, believe it or not.
So I'm gonna shift the conversation a little bit. Can you explain the political process here? You spoke about the commissioners. We have a vote 1 week from today. Is that the final vote? Do you expect it to be deferred? What is the political process in the weeks or months ahead of us?
Thank you. It could be deferred, but it very well could be that a decision is made next week. And they've been pushing this for a long time because the conversation has shifted, and we're glad that it has. We're very happy for deferrals rather than losing the battle, because it gives us more time to advocate. We do not count the votes yet for a victory, but the fact that the mayor who was leading the efforts to build the incinerator has shifted is huge. And the allies are, again, ironic because most of the Democrats on the dais are now punching at the mayor for flipping her position because they had really bought into incineration or waste to energy, as they call it, as the most environmental option. And they still have not yet opened their eyes or minds to a different form of landfilling. So their binary choice is nasty landfills or energy producing, incineration. And so they're still over here. But one by one, they are starting to shift and be open-minded, are willing to take meetings, are willing to receive advocacy and education. But at the end of the day, it is more a political decision than a scientific decision. So we need to get to 7 votes, and we're not there yet.
And I know it can be a tricky game trying to count votes, but do you have a guess about where we're at and how many commissioners we need to flip?
Sure. If you count the mayor and then commissioners who have committed to this new zero waste solution, we have 2 right now. We need 7. But we've got a lot of fence sitters, which is great because they weren't fence sitters 2 months ago, and they're open-minded. A lot of the conservatives are concerned that being pro incinerator at this point might inflame the Trump ire, which is great for us. So we're happy for that. But there are still a couple of holdouts that really want to see it. The big financial political players here are not only the incinerator companies, but FPL. And their lobbyists have held holding court at every single one of these county commission meetings very quietly. They don't get up and speak, but they speak in other ways. They're big contributors to all of these elected officials, and they provide the power for the county. They would love to control the chain of custody of that energy from start to finish, and then sell it as well. So they're a big player in this. So the politics are quite tricky here, and it's very hard to see where each commissioner is going to be based on their motivations. But we really believe that our winning campaign for this next week is that it's time to pick a side. You're either on the side of burning trash or you're on the side of the environment, and there are no other directions to take, because we have a lot of commissioners that are trying to have it both ways. I want to write a bunch of composting legislation, but I'm still pro incinerator. You can't do it. And so by forcing that choice, we hope that those who do care about the environment are willing to embrace that science and environmental message about healthy zero waste landfilling over incineration.
So you brought up one of my favorite topics to talk about, FPL, Florida Power and Light. And so in a second, I'm going to ask for you to give guidance to young people on this call who are meeting with elected officials or trying to meet with elected officials, and to give our team guidance on how we can be most effective. But if I can take the mic for a minute, I'd love to just share what my experience with Florida Power and Light is. So I first started thinking of Florida Power and Light as the political boogeyman in Florida when they ran ghost candidates, both in Central Florida and South Florida, where they literally hired consultants and funneled money to run candidates such as Jose Javier Rodriguez, who our former senator in Miami-Dade had somebody with the same name running against him who was, it's not even correct to say running because he wasn't running a campaign. He was paid to file the paperwork. And ultimately, JJR, a true climate champion, lost by less than 40 votes. I think it was 34 votes that he lost by. We've also seen Florida Power and Light really work to kill net metering at the Capitol. Net metering is important because it allows residents and businesses that have solar panels to get paid a fair rate for the excess energy that they produce. And we saw the legislature, many of them who partake in Florida Power and Light's penthouse secret invite only club across the street from the Capitol, take checks from FPL and then have passed legislation to try to make it harder for residents and businesses to get paid for the energy that they produce. And I also think about FPL for running a fake ballot initiative that made it sound like they were doing everything they could to protect solar, but we don't need solar protected. We can put solar panels up in Florida today as is. And the last Florida Power and Light tidbit of information that I want to share before I pass it back to you, Commissioner, is they are getting 80% of their power by burning methane right now. So when we are talking about where Florida gets its electricity from, we're getting a very small percentage from still coal, although that's being phased out. We're getting growing, but still small percentage from renewable sources. But the vast majority is still coming from burning and burning methane, which is obviously emitting greenhouse gases. So I appreciate you bringing up Florida Power and Light. They're a big player here.
I was on their hit list in my very first year in office. I was pushing 6 lawsuits that we were winning against them over the undergrounding of lines and the renewal of the nuclear power plant south of here. They got to the other commissioners and eventually outvoted me. But I've always kept a professional relationship with them as they keep the lights on in our community, and we work with them during hurricanes. But you can never dismiss the greenwashing. It's very hard to see through without doing your homework. But greenwashing is a crime under the SEC. You cannot deceive your shareholders around the environmental benefits you purport if it's not true. So they are very careful in the way they word everything they do. But it's very important to question anyone. You should be questioning who I am and why am I motivated and who pays my checks, because everybody has a bias, and that can affect that colors your language and how you lean as you convince people to go one way or the other.
I appreciate you bringing up greenwashing. The genCLEO team is getting ready to go up to the Capitol on March 6th to meet with our legislators. And last year when we went and we brought over 150 young people, we were opposing what we thought was a terrible greenwashing bill that would have allowed utility companies to use just a tiny bit of methane that they capture from landfills to put it in with their piped in methane and to sell it as a renewable natural gas product. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's nothing renewable, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, there's nothing renewable about it. So can you take a few minutes and give the young people on this call that want to be more politically engaged, that want to build political power, advice? How should we be showing up at these commission meetings? How should we be meeting with commissioners? Is there public education or social media education that we should be thinking about?
Absolutely. And it makes a huge difference. People don't think that it does make a difference when you show up and give your 2 minute public comment when some backroom shady deal is already done. It does make a difference. I remember being on the dais and watching as public comment sometimes shifted my fellow commissioners off of their positions. You just want to be sincere. You want to try not to read. You want to know the subject, at least to the part that you are trying to convey. You don't need to say everything. You don't need to solve anything. You need to speak from the heart about what matters and what you know that they are not taking into consideration. And you may see that light bulb go on over that policymaker's head. And don't be shy. There was a group just this week at the Miami-Dade Commission committee meeting from University of Miami. And they had just gone to go watch. And I asked them, "Are you speaking?" And they said, "No, we hadn't planned to." And I said, "Oh, you can go sign up. Anyone can speak. I mean, you're here. Why not?" And at the time, I'd heard them positioning themselves in the audience so that they would definitely be on the screen. You could see their T-shirts. But when they got up and spoke, it's as if they had choreographed an entire passionate message about the planet and their cares and their concerns and their advocacy to those legislators. So it does make a difference. But for these public comment periods, we would not be where we are right now with the county commission, with what I would say is probably an 85 to 90% chance of winning, knock on wood.
I'll take those odds. So I would love to turn to questions that participants might have, and I'll ask Alika to unmute folks that identify themselves in the chat. So I think we can start with a question from Crystal.
Hi, Mr. Russell. Thank you so much for speaking on this too. I have like a part one and a part two of a question. So part one is what's specifically like a House bill or like a bill that you may have heard that might be very, very important to to this topic? And second, if we were to kind of advocate for to be forward against this specific bill, what would you say in the commission party?
Thank you. So I have always been a pessimist around Florida state legislation. There's just such a strong majority there working so hard against the environment that a lot of the bills in the House and Senate, I don't have a lot of hope. Where I really see the rubber meets the road, and I'm biased because I was a city commissioner, is on local legislation. And that's where a lot of these contracts are written with the vendors and policies that make a difference directly in your life. And it's also a place that is a microcosm of the larger legislatures where you can actually affect. In the city of Miami, there were only 5 commissioners. So 3 commissioners constituted a majority. So if you could move the opinions of 3 legislators, you could change an ordinance in the city of Miami, the entire code. And that's something to be really proud of because it makes a huge difference. So right now, the good news is the Miami-Dade County has hired a zero waste consultant, a very well-paid group out of California that will be here. They did San Diego's zero waste plan, and trying to take everything that we're dealing with, everything, even the difficult state legislature that keeps us from being able to write, plastic bag bans or things like this preemption laws, they're called. They're going to be teaching us a potential roadmap. So we're going to advocate that all of the legislators follow the lead of the zero waste consultant. We also have one county commissioner, Raquel Regalado, who has brought a suite of zero waste policies that she's trying to implement around recycling and composting. And all of these are the first steps towards getting rid of the incinerator. For example, at next week's meeting, her items will definitely pass because they are basically asking, do you all like puppies and rainbows? Yes, sign here. So everybody's going to be a yes on hers. But on that same agenda are 2 items about where shall we place the incinerator. So those same folks can vote yes on We Love Your Recycling and Composting. Sorry, I had a call. They can vote yes on We Love Your Recycling and Composting, but then they also then vote, yeah, but let's put that incinerator in the Everglades. So this very specific legislation is where your voice can be heard. Unfortunately, in this particular case, they will not be opening public comment at the meeting next week. They opened it at the committee meeting earlier so that they could not allow public comment. I hate this sort of thing. But it's where they use the rules of the commission to sort of silence the public a little bit, because the committee has less commissioners, less people in the audience, less news outlets watching. So that's where we all get to speak. No, I'd rather speak at the big show. But you can still advocate to your elected officials. And in this particular case, I know that all of the Democrat commissioners on the dais will be very sensitive to the environmental persuasion if they see the light that we are all unified in voice advocating for zero waste solutions of recycling and composting, minimizing our landfills and making them cleaner, and saying no to a new incinerator. And I believe that they will be the numbers that pull us across the line if and when they shift, but they haven't yet. So on your social media, on your direct contacts to any of them, and on email, that's the way your advocacy should be going if you care about this issue in a way that you want to see them shift their vote. We don't demonize them, we don't shame them, but we educate, we advocate, and we empower, we thank them for their decision making. Was that two parts of your question, Crystal, or did you have a second part coming?
No, that was perfectly fine. Thank you. So just to clarify for next around next week's comment, what can we do, especially like here at genCLEO, if we want to come to this commission, what can we do?
We definitely advocate to show up, even if they're not allowing public comment. If you have t-shirts, hats, buttons, you can't carry signs, but being there in unison with those who are there is very impactful. That block of color in the audience makes a big difference. You can't yell and clap, but you can show your jazz hands when you agree with something. It really does move. And for I've even heard from the commissioners who are advocating for the zero waste stuff, saying, please don't take your foot off the gas pedal. Keep showing up, because it helps them keep the pressure on their fellow commissioners. So yes, showing up and just being there. If there's a protest outside with chants or music, that all helps too. It gets the PR side of things, because all the news outlets are there looking for sound bites, and they want to hear the opinions of everyone who cares about the issue.
I was actually going to ask you a question on if you still thought it made a difference to show up when public comment wasn't allowed, but I hear you loud and clear that showing up still does make a difference.
It's a pain, but it's worth it. It does make a difference.
Alika, do you have a question?
I do. We touched a little bit about the climate crisis impacts that are very real of burning trash. My understanding is we also have less than 100 years of soil left for agriculture, and it takes 100 years to develop 1 inch of topsoil. So a big part of this issue, in my eyes, is the benefits of composting so we can regenerate our soil health for our generations and future generations. I'm just curious if this is something that's been considered or talked about, or if maybe there's a benefit to bringing this up with commissioners.
Thank you. I did not know that statistic around our remaining capacity of nutrients in our soil, and composting is so foreign to us here in South Florida that I took a trip 2 weeks ago out to Austin, Texas, where they have a successful composting contract with a very strong vendor out there. They do zero waste philosophies. They do not incinerate. They have about the same population and waste flow as we do, about 4,000 tons a day. And there's no incineration. And their electeds would never even think of it. I didn't know that, but I went there to go see. And I met with electeds and their vendors. And when I went to visit the composting was what really opened my eyes, because I don't have a lot of experience with composting. I had heard all the myths of the negatives, the leaching, the smells. They can even catch on fire if not managed properly because they get so hot. And I was so impressed with this facility The black gold, as they call it, that's produced at the end, is that exact rich nutrient soil. And to use Miami terms, they call it pure uncut. They can actually subdivide it and make multiple streams of products that can then be sold in Home Depot and Lowe's and to municipalities, to farms, to residents. You don't always need to use that richest, most concentrated, very expensive product. And so it was impressive. And not only was it impressive, it was profitable. And they had advice for me. This particular vendor was called Organics by Gosh, and they were a third-party independent vendor on their own land. They said, if we had our druthers and we could do it again, we would advocate for the community to use their land and do a private-public partnership with the vendor, because that takes a huge cost pressure off of the vendor that will lower the cost to the city, but also make it much easier for them to be profitable and less cutting corners. So yeah, that composting is definitely, we cannot get there without composting. Even more important in my mind than recycling.
I have been composting for a couple years now, and the excitement of seeing the worms and turning waste into that like rich, earthy material, it is such a special thing. I'm not sure if this is a question you'll be able to answer, but in the chat, Ashley asked, and Ashley said, Miami-Dade Waste Management isn't providing any more earth machine bins. Do you know of any other organizations that can donate that type of bin to schools that are interested in pursuing more compost?
Yes, it's crazy that the county does not have a proper composting program. In one district, there is a small program, but all of our legislation and permitting process works against composting. So to allow it is going to need an entire shift in how we permit, because of that, the original paradigm of competition to the incinerator was set up. It dissuaded us from composting. Schools are actually ahead of the game. There's a lot of Miami-Dade County schools that already have food scrap programs, and they are producing their own compost. There are a couple organizations in Miami-Dade. Someone can help me by throwing them in the chat if they wouldn't mind, or just chiming in, where you can even now get a bin at your house. But even they are in jeopardy because Compost for Life, thank you, Sophie, and because what they're doing is receiving waste at their site. And technically, you're not supposed to be allowed to do that unless you have an industrial waste style permit, not an agricultural permit, but they're receiving garbage basically. So there needs a lot of changes to how we do permitting and legislation, but it's not that hard. You just need a willing legislative body.
That's so helpful. I am going to take 1 minute to shamelessly pitch to why the participants here should join genCLEO for our Earth Advocacy Day next month. But then I'm going to pass it back to you, Commissioner, for any final words or guidance that you can offer us. But Alika, if you don't mind sharing the Earth Advocacy Day link again, we have 2 buses traveling from Miami-Dade, a bus traveling from Orlando, Tampa, Gainesville, and we are trying to bring 500 youth to the Capitol. Everything today that the commissioner has talked about is how we make a difference on the local level, but we also have a fight in Tallahassee. So much of what we try to do on a local level gets preempted by legislators up at Tallahassee who want to stop us from banning plastic straws or producing wind energy if the technology exists. They want to ban local governments from setting limits on expanding pipelines. So much of what we can do can be done at a local level, but a lot of what we need to be advocating for is also at a state level. So you can join at no cost. We have buses, we're providing hotels, food, training, everything you need to meet with your legislators will be a part of our Earth Advocacy Day. So I invite anyone that hasn't signed up yet to please sign up and join us. And as the commissioner said, even if we are not going to be allowed to talk next Wednesday, showing up is so important. And so, Alika, the last thing I'll ask of you to do is to share an invite to join us next Wednesday. The genCLEO team will be meeting before the meeting starts. We'll have coffee, we'll have snacks. You'll be able to meet other youth activists that care about a sustainable green future. So I invite you to join us. And Commissioner, with just the last few minutes here, any advice that you would give to our team and any inspiration that you would offer, particularly for people that are feeling maybe like it's hard to accomplish the win. We see so much federal and state policies that feel like we're moving in the opposite direction. But you've given us inspiration and said we might have a 85 or 90% chance of a win here. Any advice that you would give to the young activists to either refine our tactics or to help us stay motivated for the fights ahead?
Absolutely. And stay tuned, especially to this one, because when we are successful, this will be a case study for the future, not just around incineration, but all sorts of environmental advocacy. Because technically, by the numbers, we should not win this. The billions of dollars that are going to be awarded to the incineration company, as well as the elected officials who are monolithically in line with their vision, the writing was on the wall that this was a futile effort, that there was no chance for us to be successful. But it should be very inspiring to everyone that with a holistic strategy and a good coalition, a strong message, good communication, good education, and then really concentrating local. Check your partisan hat at the door. We're talking about the environment, and the person you disagree with the most on many issues may be the vote that you need, or the advocate for whatever their own selfish reasons might be, or maybe it even is the environment. But really try to be single-minded in terms of your objective, and put that strategy together. It is very possible. These things should not be looked at as impossible or futile. It's very inspiring to see everyone coming together on such a boring issue like garbage, but to become passionate about it and make a difference on it, it is incredibly fulfilling when you get to that finish line and you see that you've shifted minds and made a difference on policy. So please stay involved and stay active, however it is that you do.
Well, thank you so much for leading this conversation. You've helped us understand the inside political process, the science behind waste, and how we can achieve a zero waste future. I ask everyone to join me in giving a virtual round of applause for the commissioner, and can't wait to see everybody next Wednesday. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate you. Oh, and by the way, at this very same time, Debris Free Oceans was hosting a zero waste meeting on Zoom. We've recorded ours, and they're going to promote our recording to their audience tonight. And so we encourage you to look up Debris Free Oceans and their zero waste initiative and the recorded meeting that they took on. So I have a feeling we probably stole a few of each other's viewers.
Well, I certainly appreciate you taking the time to meet with us, and we'll be excited to share this recording so that we can share the message beyond the folks that could join us tonight. Thank you so much, Commissioner, and thank you for everyone who joined us tonight.
Appreciate you guys. Take care. Have a good night.